Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Rico.
I'm Tony.
And this is the podcast known as Relatively Sound, the podcast where we can be heroes just for a day. Now, today, Tony and I, we have the pleasure of having our friend Chris Antonucci back on the podcast. Chris, how you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Oh,
Early
he's
flex.
flexing. Tony always calls me out whenever I flex the album on vinyl that we're talking about for that day. And
I had to.
I'm glad you can, welcome us in the tradition. Um,
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're the reason we're doing this episode. I
Yeah, I've
mean,
been waiting for this
yeah, we three of us made plans to do this episode
at least
like
a year ago.
yeah, almost a year ago now. And Tony and I got really busy and
Life
um
happened.
life happens, Chris and I got to do a couple petty episodes the end of last year, which was nice, but yeah, Tony and I have been listening to this David Bowie album Heroes. If you are not aware, we listened to our first David Bowie album together, Tony and I, when we did The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust. Tony and I, besides a couple singles, David Bowie was one of our blind spots when it comes to music, when it comes to rock, when it comes to just, some of the bigger artists out there. And Chris, huge David Bowie fan. I think we probably talked a lot about that in that episode. So I'll put a link
Yeah.
in the description. That way we don't have to bog this episode down with
Yeah.
all the whole story again.
Whole history.
But I really enjoyed that album, Tony. I think you did too, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I've actually met a few people, talked to not even that long ago, that also really like Bowie. So it was cool to actually be able to be like, yeah, I know, I love that album too. They said that Ziggy was their favorite, and I'm glad to be a part of that, be able to connect with people,
Understandable.
just for knowing a really big, iconic, great album.
Hmm.
Yeah. So we're like, okay, where do we go from here? And Chris, you picked Heroes, and maybe you told us in the previous episode why, but I'm just curious if you want to let everyone know why you went from Ziggy Stardust to this one.
All right. Well, I don't remember what I said, but
It,
basically,
it was July 9th when you gave us Heroes. I tracked it down, don't
Johnny
worry.
has the receipts,
Yeah.
thank you.
but not of last year, right? Was that the previous year, right?
Oh, no, it was last year.
No, yeah, it should have been.
Was it last
Yeah.
year?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was just last year.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So I don't remember exactly why, but just saying, just to show like good example of Bowie's diversity and athleticism of his career. Also, because since you're a big U2 fan, this is one of the albums that he worked on with Brian Eno and partly recorded at Hansa Studios in Berlin, which is where U2, wow, I can't, where U2 first started recording Achtung Baby, and Bono has said like it's one of the reasons why that they wanted to make that big change from Joshua Tree to Achtung Baby.
Yeah, and I did a little research on this album. I don't know, Tony, did you do any or no? Do you just remain?
Not really. I figured YouTube would have the grounds covered, so I just strapped in for the listening experience.
Well, from the little research I did, there is a guitar player on this album, Tony, that you brought up a couple episodes ago when we did your album, your suggestion with Yes.
Are you talking about were you talking about Adrian Belew as far as like talking about someone?
Well, we were talking about Adrian Belew because we got into Talking Heads a little bit, but King Crimson.
Where are you going with this? Where are you going with this?
Robert Fripp.
Robert? No, dude. I wasn't gonna guess that just because I is he actually on this record?
Oh, there Chris is pointing out on the,
Oh my
on the
gosh.
record.
Dude, I had no clue. Okay, this changes everything.
Oh my
BRB,
God.
I'll be back in an hour. Let me listen to the album one more time.
But yeah, I
Uh,
think you give a quick rundown. So after his glam rock period, he did Diamond Dogs in '74, which was going from glam rock to the soul and R&B influence that um, he would do on Young Americans, which actually just celebrated his 50th anniversary a couple weeks ago. That
Oh,
was
wow.
recorded in Philly. And then after that, he did the movie The Man Who Fell to Earth, and he did the album Station to Station, which is my personal favorite. That was in '76, and that's like he said he has no recollection of making that album because had a ridiculous cocaine addiction. So part of him wanting to get clean was get out of LA, which he hated. He went to Berlin, or was it Switzerland? I forgot. But he went to Europe with Iggy Pop, who also had a bad drug addiction at the time. So he helped Iggy with his first solo album. I think it was either The Idiot or Lust for Life, which was kind of in line with what Bowie's new direction. And then January 77 or 76, 77, he released Low, the first album of his Berlin Trilogy. And that's like another fantastic album, which I was debating, should I give it that to you guys or Heroes? But then I figured Heroes. And then Heroes follow like months later.
Okay, wow.
So
I
it's the
didn't realize
second
he.
trilogy.
Yeah, 2 albums in a year is always crazy.
I mean, that was like the norm back then too.
Well, yeah, because I think I was going through his discography on Wikipedia, and I was like, it looks like he releases like almost an album a year. I'm like, that's crazy. Um, and then I was reading too. It seemed like so Brian Eno is all over this album, but not so much as a producer, right?
Right. He was more as a collaborator.
Yeah,
As Tony Visconti was producer, I believe, or co-producer.
yeah,
I
that
saw
sounds
his
right.
It was
credits.
basically
Yeah.
the three of them were the producers. Actually, yeah, technically by Bowie and Tony Visconti
Well,
were the
speaking of
producers.
Tony, I'm interested. Did you have any expectations going to this album? Because the only song on this album that I like recognize by name is the title track, and I don't know if I ever had heard the original version. I know I've heard some covers when after David passed, there were tons of covers.
Everyone, yeah.
Yeah, but I had never really heard the original song, so I had no idea going into this album what to expect. So, Tony, I don't know if you did based off what we heard on the previous album.
No, I didn't really know what to expect. I mean, yeah, basically Ziggy just being like the only real reference point I had, but seeing that the album was what, like 5 years later, seeing that before, in between those two works, the only song I really knew was Fame, and I'm like, okay, that's not much of a reference point to help me with it, but I imagine it would be pretty different, just kind of what I know about Bowie, his diversity, like you had mentioned, Chris.
Yeah.
And I like when Heroes started playing when I was listening through the album, I was like, okay, I recognize this song, but I don't know where it's going, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I kind of just was expecting a good album at the very least.
It's also like the period where he had like probably his best like band, you could say. Um, the rhythm trio known as like the Damn Trio was Dennis Davis on drums, Carlos Alomar on guitar, and George Murray on bass. So they like were on a lot of those mid to late '70s albums that he did.
Okay. So I imagine for Low, granted, you know how close it was the
Yeah,
same.
Low, Station to Station, I believe, Young Americans,
And
Lodger after this, and I think Scary Monsters in 1980.
what's the third Berlin album? What's it called?
Lodger.
Okay, that's the one I feel like I don't ever hear about. Like I've heard Low referenced a bunch,
Yeah.
and obviously this album, but
I don't even
that
recognize
one,
the album cover. Kind of a wild album cover.
yeah, because I think the Low one I can picture in my mind how that one looks, but the
Yeah.
oh yeah, I would not have.
I mean, I don't know what song you would know on that anyway, so which I don't even think was recorded in Berlin
Oh,
anyway.
but it's just been part of the.
Yeah, just because of how like experimental it was and creatively for him.
Well, do we want to jump into this track list and go song for song?
Do it.
Um, so,
Well, real quick,
oh, yeah,
actually,
Tony.
Chris, I'm curious. So
Yeah,
I know you
I'm
said
listening.
Station to Station is your favorite, maybe.
Yeah.
But what is it about this album that you really like?
I just consider it like his greatest album.
Like with
It's his best.
consistency, like production and songwriting, like just all corners?
Yeah, just like, um, yeah, just like how like out of the norm it sounded compared to like what was going on at the time. I mean, really, this is like a guy who was like one of the biggest stars in the planet, and he's just making music that like could have turned off a lot of people. And this is like Bowie, like really being himself and just exploring, following that muse, like wherever it takes him, whether people like it or not.
Now, I
Fair
will
enough.
say, Chris, Tony uses this question sometimes to trap you. He's like, why do you like this album so much? So just so then he can shit on it later.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. No, no, no. No, no, there's no dirty business here, all right?
But all right, album opener, Beauty and the Beast. Tony, I'm curious what you thought of this track.
Um, Banger, maybe my favorite song off the album. It is
Oh,
just
wow.
It's
it's it's so exciting and fun, catchy, but it's unique.
oh yeah,
I felt like it had like a sprinkle of like the glam stuff in there for sure.
yep.
Um, yeah, like every time I like went to listen to this album, I was like, okay, let me get in the headspace, especially like kind of, after listening to the album a few times and knowing how the back half sounds, then you restart it and it's
Yeah.
like, okay, we're starting, starting hot.
Because like the album's also basically like formatted the same way that low was formatted the first half, like songs, and then like the second half was like more of the experimental, instrumental stuff. But yeah, it's like definitely more fully formed than low.
So I agree with Tony. I will say there's one other song I prefer over it though.
Hmm.
Um, but this, because I did rank the songs, and this is in my top three. Um, I think it's a perfect way to start the album. I usually like an album opener that's, full of energy, has a little attitude, kind of maybe shows you what to expect throughout the whole album. Although I will say this album does go in a surprising way that I was not expecting on the very first listen, and we'll get into that in a
Hmm.
bit. Um, I actually, funny enough, not something that I thought I would be saying ever in my life, but I liked the kind of dance beat it had. Um, because I do feel like this song is definitely a little bit more in the pop element than some of the songs on Ziggy Stardust.
Definitely.
Like, it still had some nice, guitar moments, but a lot more synths, kind of more sound effects and keyboards. Um, I thought his vocals reminded me of a mixture of David Byrne's, Iggy Pop, and Lou Reed. Like, and maybe
I
that's
mean,
just because Tony and I
Chris and I
heard.
are doing the math in our head right now, trying to brew it together.
yeah, I could definitely hear Iggy's influence because they were together a lot at the time. Like I mentioned, did his two albums, The Idiot and Lust for Life. And you could definitely see David Byrne being influenced by it.
And I really got to Talking Heads vibes with the kind of middle section keyboard break. It
Mm,
reminded me a little bit of something like Life During Wartime, which uh, Tony's going to be getting that album very soon. Um,
my favorite.
yeah,
Ooh,
that
okay, a lot of
that
pressure there on you, Rico, for it.
I know. It's a top three for me from them. So I will say my only little quip about the song is the bridge isn't my favorite part of the song, but it's like so short that
Yeah,
it doesn't take away from the song. It's just even now on my like I don't know 10th 20th listen because we've been listening to this album since almost a year ago. Um, it still just takes me out of it just for like a little bit, but it's still entertaining. It still feels like it fits the song. I will say one thing, and this is kind of just a touch on the whole album, is a lot of the lyrics I didn't really pick up on a first time, and I had to like Google them and kind of read into them. And some of them I still don't know what the hell he's singing about. But I did like the Fetch a Priest line on this song.
Yes.
Um, I just thought that was funny.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Rico for most of this here.
As you should.
The bridge, it's definitely not like the most memorable part to me of the song, but it never takes me out of it. I wouldn't go that far. Something that I really appreciated, and just like starting off the album, like it just kind of reminded me, especially lately, we've been listening to a lot of kind of like songwriter stuff,
Hmm.
maybe kind of more like the indie stuff,
Yeah.
late 90s. And hearing this immediately, I'm just like, this guy's a rock star. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
he's putting on the big
That's
energy, the getting into character. So like hearing him do the low vocal, especially when he just says, Beauty and the Beast, the
yeah.
title, hearing this super high my falsetto, which I'm not even going to try to imitate right here. It's just really exciting, and it's kind of a reminder how fun music can be.
Yeah.
Truthfully, I didn't really dive too far into the lyrics, not because I wasn't a fan of them, but I
Hmm.
was like, I don't know if I need to dive into them to enjoy them.
It's an explosive opener. Just like first time you hear it, you're like, oh fuck, that's so good.
Yeah, yeah.
And I do. Last thing I wanted to mention is I did really like the backing vocals. Tony was speaking of
Yeah.
the vocals. I do like the backing vocals. I didn't look up to see who they were.
That's
I
probably
probably
good.
should have.
Was it also Robert Fripp?
No, just probably Bowie and maybe like Tony Visconti and Eno.
Because I swear I heard a female vocal. Am I making that up, or does just one of them have a really high voice? Maybe.
Oh yeah, so it's Bowie, Visconti, and Antonia Mas.
Ah, okay, okay,
Ooh,
I
more
okay.
wonder.
So
Antonia.
I'm not going crazy then. Okay, good. But yeah, I think a great opening track. And then I didn't know where the album was going to go from there. I was like, okay, we're a little bit more groovy, we're a little bit more poppy, but we still have the energy from something off of Ziggy Stardust.
Like you could really go anywhere from there.
Yeah, and I kind of think I think with the next track, Joe the Lion, I feel like we kind of go back a little bit to a slightly more classic rock sound, but we maintain the energy from Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, a
Um,
little.
it starts off with those, guitar riffs, which I think just really have a great tone. I love how kind of noisy they are,
Pretty sure that
Uh,
might have been Fripp.
Fripp. Yeah, I mean, I really like most of the guitar work on this album. So,
And I think like any of the leads was him.
yeah, and I did read that he like a lot of them are one takes, and like something that Bowie was like in love with was that he just came in without having any direction and just being able to create these guitar parts like on the spot.
Yeah, it's
Um,
just blows your mind. Like,
yeah, I will say that for Joe the Lion, the vocal effects that kind of starts off the song, I wasn't the biggest fan of because I
mhm.
never am when it comes to any artist, even artists that I love.
Yeah,
Um,
Yeah, he's a little biased sometimes, but I'll let it slide.
but they don't maintain during the entire song.
hmm
And I kind of like that this song has a little bit of a darker vibe than Beauty and the Beast.
Oh yeah,
Um, and yeah, I mean, I love the energy. The guitar work, like during the second verse, absolutely killer. Um, he's just like going off in the back,
yeah,
but he doesn't like take the spotlight away from Bowie because he's still like singing. He's singing
right.
his lyrics, but it just worked perfectly in the background. There's a section too, I think, after the first verse where it gets a little softer in sound, and there's like a
Mhm.
guitar riff pan to the right that also is very tasty. Yeah, I thought it was great energy for a second track on an album. Tony, I'm curious if you thought the same or.
Well, just real quick, it is kind of crazy that on Ziggy, like Alan Wakeman was on there doing keys. Um,
Rick.
I meant, yeah, I said that backwards. I'm sorry. I always get the names confused. Not Snape, bro. I'm so sorry. I just
Like, who's
every
Alan?
time,
Alan Rickman,
every
yeah,
time, I'm dropping the
the
ball
guy from
here.
Die Hard and Harry Potter.
My bad, my bad. I always do that. But my point
Yeah.
being, it's interesting, kind of that Bowie's working with prog musicians. Robert Fripp, like very prog. Wakeman, I'll say to be safe,
Mhm.
also very prog. I know he chose Yes instead, but just kind of an observation there. Um, I'll say Joe the Lion. I definitely like it.
hmm
But out of the first half of the album, where we're kind of the bulk of the normal songs. It might
Yeah.
be my least favorite of them.
Ooh, Tony's the first one to.
I'm the first one to throw that out there.
I
I
thought it
actually
would be
think
me.
it's cool. I think Rico made a good point about the guitar. It's quite
Hmm.
chaotic, but it's not like the front of the show. I think for me, it was just kind of less catchy than Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, maybe a little, e- even though Beauty and the Beast is kind of full throttle the whole time, Joe the Lion is not super dynamic, but there is a lot you can really look into it still. I don't really have a problem with it, but maybe it didn't quite scratch that itch for me.
Yeah, there's
Um,
like times when like during the day, I just like Beauty and the Beast, that chorus will just get stuck in my head. I'll just be singing like the my in my head.
yeah, right, right. So, I mean, how do you feel about this, Chris?
No, I
Rico and
like
I
it.
are kind of split on it.
It's a good second track for the album. It just keeps it going, the momentum of it.
I will say the lyrics were interesting when I did a little research
Mhm.
because it seems like he wrote this song as part of a tribute to an artist named Chris Burden.
It sounds about right.
And there's in the very beginning of the song where he sings, "Tell you who you are if you nail me to my car." I was not expecting to click on that annotation on Genius to see an actual person nailed to a Volkswagen, which was part
Whoa.
of Chris Burden's like his artry.
All right, hang on. Doing a quick Google search here. Keep
Tony's
talking.
got to look it up now
Sounds,
too.
that sounds like something he would be interested in.
Yeah, so I did appreciate the lyrics for like I do like it when a lyric like makes me have to do a little research and learn something that I didn't know beforehand.
Hmm.
Um, and so I did feel like this song had a little bit more of an interesting narrative lyrically than Beauty and the Beast. Um, but yeah, I like this. This one is also. Well, let me check. I have my rankings up right here. Is it top? It's top four. It's top four on the album for me.
All
So
right.
I have it a little higher than Tony. It sounds like
I'm sorry, where did you say it was for you?
top four. Top four.
Top four.
Yeah.
I will say I do love that yell he does on Made of Iron where he just kind of takes the note up. That is kind of the highlight of the song for me, I have to say.
Yeah, that is good. All right, so
I
we
just
got
love Robert Fripp's guitar work. It's just like I'm listening to it in my head now, just like
yeah. I think
that
it's some of my
tremolo or something. Maybe it is.
there's
Yeah,
one other song that I think I like the guitar work a little better, but yeah, it's killer in this one.
as I'm kind of listening back here on Spotify here, I'm like, okay, I can kind of see I can see Robert Fripp in this now. I feel kind of ashamed that I was so like, what? No way, but
I know I was kind of hoping you hadn't done the research because I'm like, I don't know if Tony's gonna pick out on her first listen. I know I wouldn't have because I don't listen to King Crimson or
Mhm.
I don't listen to prog like that. So, but I'm like, maybe Tony has, or maybe he just knows, but he
But Mr.
didn't.
Fripp is all over the next track.
Yeah, title track,
hmm.
Heroes. I just gotta say, this is my favorite. I mean, maybe that's a very basic answer. And I'm known for sometimes having basic tastes.
That's fine.
So, but yeah, this is my favorite. Like, this is such a great feel good song. Like, every time it comes on, it just puts me in a better mood. Um,
Definitely.
and there's not like a ton of songs that do that for me. Like there's songs that like if I'm in the right mood and it comes on, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a great song. I'm loving it and I'm happy. But this is one of those songs where I could be like in a not so great mood and I hear it, and it's just like it has this inspirational feel to it.
Yeah.
I love every single guitar riff and lick on this song. Um, this does not well like from the two previous songs, I would not have guessed this was Robert Fripp. Um, I think it's a lot more toned down, but it's like it just the riffs just fit the song perfectly. And I
Yeah.
like too how in the chorus, like he's playing a riff and he keeps it the same as the chords are changing underneath. I'm always a sucker for bands do something like that when it comes to like a riff and a progression.
Yeah.
Um, this song gave me a bit like I feel like this song probably influenced a lot of bands. And for me, one of my favorite bands, I feel like this was probably a big influence on were the Killers.
Hmm.
Um, this sounded like something that they would be listening to while they were creating some of their albums, like a Battleborn or even like a Hot Fuss.
Oh,
Um,
definitely.
so maybe that helped me like the song. But yeah, this one is just like I love the lyrics and I love
Hmm.
his vocals. I think the vocals in this song felt the most like him, like the most genuine. Like,
Oh yeah.
and I understand a lot of singers sometimes sing with like a different personality, or their songs have characters that they're singing through, but this just felt like authentic to him, which I appreciated. So,
Right.
um, this is the part now where Tony says this is my least favorite on the album.
No, no, I think this probably is my favorite. It's definitely a little bit more toned down than like Beauty and the Beast, not to keep going back to that one. But I just think like for a what, like a it's like a 6 minute song, it's really good and it keeps my
Yeah.
attention through. Definitely just having that kind of feel good, but like maybe almost bittersweet vibe. Like it kind of makes you feel something that's hard to explain.
Hmm.
Uh, some songs just have that mojo. It kind of reminds me, not really what the song is, but that sort of effect, kind of like how I feel with like Born to Run. Like there's just something
Yeah.
special about that song. You hear it, you're like, that's a good song. Um, I do like that, like I do like the vocals a lot. He keeps it chill for most of it, but he waits till like probably halfway through before he starts singing it higher. I kind of like that little bit of restraint there. I thought it was a keys, but now knowing Robert Fripp, it was probably a lot of guitars. How vocal, that main lead sounds.
Hmm.
Definitely a lot more. I'm not gonna say tasteful playing, but a little bit more like kind of simpler. Here's the melody. This really pairs along well with what the rest of the band's doing. I like that the lyrics are very like they're very simple in what they're doing with kind of each of the verses, how they're structured. But I think, that makes the song really powerful, especially when the first two tracks, you're kind of like, all right, this dude could be talking about whatever. I mean,
Hmm.
bro was talking about nailing someone to the car, a Volkswagen. Uh, so it's kind of nice for the song to still be a little bit abstract, I would say,
Yeah.
but to, get the message across pretty easily,
Hmm.
successfully.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was one of the ones that Eno co-wrote the music to, and even
Oh, okay.
Fripp's work I noticed this morning. I'm like, oh, that might have been like an influence on the Edge for With or Without You, that infinite guitar sound, just sustaining those notes. And
Yeah.
I could see that.
there's a great video I'll have to send you guys after of Tony Visconti just talking about the making of that song, going like start with the rhythm track, and then Robert Fripp's part. He said like Robert Fripp played like three things, like didn't know what to use, so they just used all of them. And then
Hey,
Bo,
sometimes it's got to be like that.
yeah, how they did Bowie's vocal, which is amazing. They had two mics set up in the room, and even like he has said and Bowie has said like the lyrics were inspired because they took a break, I think, for Bowie to work on the lyrics, and then he saw Tony and it might be like his future wife. They were because they were right near the Berlin Wall, so he had and to see them kissing. So that's where a lot of like some of those lyrics in the song "Where We Kiss" by the wall
Oh,
was
okay, that makes
directly
sense.
influenced by that.
And Tony made a good point too about the lyrics. Like, I like that they're easy to follow and they have relatable moments. I will be king, you will be queen.
Yeah.
But then I like sometimes the like more interesting lyrics, like, I wish you could swim like the
Mhm.
dolphins. Like, I think
Yeah.
that's a really cool line that's not as like, cliche and something you hear a lot of the time. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, to me, this is like peak Bowie. Like, I like this maybe even more than my favorite off of Ziggy Stardust.
Hmm.
Just Moon
So
Age Daydream was your favorite?
yeah, that one, it was like a tie between that and the almost title track.
Oh, okay.
Those were like my two favorite. But this is like one I could see me putting on playlist of like not necessarily happy music, because I do understand where you're coming from, Tony, of it having like a
Uplifting or something?
bittersweet, huh?
Like uplifting or something?
Uplifting, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's a good word for
It
it.
is like kind of slightly heroic in it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, that's what it's about, being a hero. Um,
All right. Now, I'm really excited to discuss the next song. Not
All
even
right.
because I want to share my thoughts, but I need to know Rico's thoughts. I
oh
think this
God.
is where Rico's going to be like bottom of the list. I'll take it over the ambient tracks. Like, Rico, do you want to
Hear
start
it.
here?
And I didn't even take it over some of the ambient tracks, if we're being honest. Yeah, this one, Sons of the Silent Age, admittedly not one of my favorites. I want to like it more than I do, because I do think it has a lot of interesting things going on with it. That even just the very beginning, it has that kind of Arabian sound, which again we're gonna get to later on in the album.
Yeah.
I was like not expecting the saxophone,
Hmm.
but then it becomes very kind of whimsical with the keys, and I'm still not sure how the song's gonna play out. I do like the bass line and the drums and like the cymbal work during like the verses. And then like the chorus is very interesting too because it has kind of a slower vibe. Like it's almost feels like halftime from the rest of the song.
Hmm.
But if I'm being honest, the vocals by halfway through the song were a little grating for me. I didn't love like the chord choices or some of the backing vocals and guitar work. I
Oh,
will
we're
say
getting
that
to that.
the saving grace was I did find when I did research into the lyrics, I found the lyrics to be very interesting. So I think that's what I was impressed with the most with the song and just the arrangement of it. But yeah, like as one whole musical piece, it was not my favorite. So Tony was right.
All right, let me tell you why you're wrong.
Okay.
So pretty much everything that you shat on, I actually really liked. So I did like how it starts off very dramatic and like physically feels slow to get through, and like you said, it kind of does tie with the closing track, which we'll get to later. But like right off the bat, like I think that it's a cool intro that gets your attention, and then the chord that they go to when Bowie starts singing, my ears perk up. I'm like, I like that a lot. Uh, cool, spacey. And then my favorite part is the chorus where it gets slow, and then
Hmm.
it's just like Bowie gets so dramatic with the delivery.
Almost
Like,
operatic in a way.
yeah, yeah, and like to me, it sounds like something that like I would like maybe try to do myself, like writing, but I wouldn't be able to make it work. But somehow Bowie makes it like the best part of the song here. It's so cool. And even too to talk about the guitar work a little bit when he gets into that chorus and the guitar kind of does those little like hammer-ons and slides and stuff. That's really fun. I mean, it's definitely like a one of a kind song, right? Like there's a lot of bold choices here. And
Mhm.
I wonder if this was a difficult one to do in the studio. And I also wonder too how happy the band was with it. You know, sometimes you don't always get to hear like sometimes maybe your favorite song the band doesn't really care for, vice versa. So this is just a very cute one. You know, I like the song. We'll end there.
Love it. Love your takes.
So I
Tony's more
Good,
so
the
than
right
Rico, but
takes.
I was gonna say you probably agree with Tony more than me.
I respect it.
I did, like I said, I did find the lyrics interesting. Like it's from the research I did, it sounds like he was singing about the Silent Age,
Hmm.
which I
Private
guess he
Silent
would
movie.
he was born just a little after
Yeah.
that. So
Not
I
me
found
googling what the silent age is.
Private
The game
Silent
on
era
Steam.
of films is
Oh,
my
okay, that makes
but
sense.
I like I said, I appreciate what the song's doing. Like even the outro when I first heard it, I was like, this is a little frightening. Um, but like I appreciate it's like a song I appreciate more than I like. Um, but I can see why Tony would really like it because it's a
Mhm.
little bit more out there. It's a little. I mean, I do think it's a little bit more of a challenging listen, but not in a bad way. You know, I do think some of the ambient tracks we're going to get to maybe is even slightly more challenging. But this is still like a song, a full on song. It's just I will say this is the type of Bowie I was a little afraid that we would get more between these two albums, more so than we already have. So it made me appreciate the rest of the album and Ziggy Stardust as well because just my own like stereotypical mind thought that like a lot of Bowie music would sound like this song. And
Really?
that's either like this or the really catchy poppy stuff like a Changes or a Fame. So I'm glad that actually a lot of it so far I've really enjoyed, and that this was for me kind of so far an outlier.
Something I do want to add to, I think the placement of it is really well done. I mean, because
Mhm.
you hear Heroes, you know, long song that's, you know, amazing.
Yep.
How are you going to top Heroes? You know, you don't. So you just give
Right.
them a song that you're like, you know, you just got to jump into. I think that was a smart move. Yeah.
Now I will say the next track, Blackout, I
Mhm.
much prefer over the previous track. Um, this one This is like the song where I felt the most like something that you two maybe would have taken inspiration from.
Very
Um,
fast.
and not just because I know they have a song called Blackout or something
Yeah.
similar. I because I don't even like that U2 album. I like how it starts off where it's like I don't even know what instrument I'm listening to. Like I was like, is that a keyboard? Is that like a really whacked out guitar? But then like the song picks up and I love it for kind of how groovy the bass is and the keyboard part that we heard in the intro just sounds a lot more locked in now, with the bass and the drums. This one felt like it had a lot of moving parts and sections, which I really enjoyed. But I
Mhm.
liked each one where, like, with Sons of the Silent Age, like all the different parts I didn't really enjoy. This song I did. I liked the sections where it was like kind of the drum breakdown, and then like he almost wasn't singing; he was almost just like talking really fast, which I
Mhm.
enjoyed. And again, this one too had a lot of lyrics that made me very invested in the song. And doing the research, I'm like, some say the song was about a specific blackout, I think in New York City. I guess
Oh, possibly, yeah.
he
Summer of
said
'77.
he said in an interview it was about power cuts, and then some other like music historians said that it was about certain collapses in Berlin. So like has different narratives that they could all be
Yeah.
true or none of it could be true, but it still made for an interesting listen.
Hmm.
Uh, Tony, I'm curious where if this is going to fall more in like the Joe the Lion for you, or if this is going to be one of your more favorite ones.
So this one I definitely like more than Joe the Lion. I will say, I think for me, the highlight of the song is just like the main verse section. I just really like the chord progression. It's got a good groove. It's catchy. It's not that I dislike the other sections, but for me, it's definitely like this is a highlight. This is where I'm really enjoying the song. Yeah, I definitely can appreciate that it moves around a little more. We're definitely back to the dancey feel, the start of the album. Um, which I think is good, which I think is kind of good to kind of bookend the first half here. Chris, you have the actual record. I imagine this is the closing track to side one.
Yep.
All right, yeah, yeah. So I think the placement of it is also good again, which I think does impact the song. But to me, it is kind of I would put it above Joe the Lion, like a decent amount still. But to me,
Hmm.
it is definitely a step below the rest of the songs on that we've discussed so far.
I like
But
it.
with each listen, I'm starting to like it a little more as far as a full song.
Yeah.
See, I disagree a little bit just because I like Joe the Lion just a slightly bit. Like they're back to back in my rankings, but I like Joe the Lion just a tiny bit more because you said you like this one more, right, Tony?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Joe the Lion's still cool and stuff to me. I mean, you mentioned kind of having like a classic rock sound. I almost hear Joe the Lion almost like heading towards like 80s rock kind of, um, which I think is cool. But
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. Um, is this? How do you like this one, Chris? I'm curious if this is like
you're awfully quiet on this one, Chris.
I'm just letting
no.
you guys talk. I'm enjoying it. No, I like it. It's just like I don't know. It's just tough for me to describe just 'cause of how much I love it. It just works perfectly in the context of the entire album, especially the side.
Well, I am very curious, Chris. I'm almost more so about your opinions than Tony's for this next batch of songs because although this next one isn't necessarily considered in the trilogy of the complete instrumental songs on the second side of the album, it like might as well be like an instrumental song. Like I know they sing the title of it
Hmm.
sort of in the song, but V2 Schneider,
Yeah.
it's it's an interesting song. I will say I enjoy it because it still like it just feels like a normal song minus more vocals, minus more
Yeah.
lyrics.
No, I get it.
It has a really cool bass line that begins the song. It has these kind of like rocket sound effects, which I think was partly inspired by the title because V2, is a German made rocket used in World War II. And then Schneider being the last name of one of the co founders of the band Kraftwerk.
Oh
Um,
yeah, they
Oh,
were
okay.
definitely they were pretty sure they were a big influence on him at this time.
Yeah, so I like it for like those references. And I do think the horn section is catchy.
Yeah,
The distorted guitar outro is really cool. And it's just short enough to where it's like it doesn't overstay its welcome.
yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I'm curious of what you guys think of this. Like before we really get into the instrumental songs, like, do you guys think this is a good segue into the rest of the album, or is this kind of a weaker track?
I do think it is a good segue, you know, kind of like you said, pretty much being an instrumental, but having kind of more of a melody to, you know, where he says the title and stuff.
Hmm.
I mean, call me crazy, especially as I'm like kind of listening back.
I'll call you worse than crazy.
I could probably take this over Joe the Lion and Blackout, depending on my
Oh
mood.
no.
It's just a really cool vibe. The song moves forward. Like you said, the horns are catchy. It's also one of those songs that kind of just makes me feel a certain way, and I can't really explain it. I mean, I know Rico's shaking his head over there, but I think it's
I don't like the way you said a certain way. It
sort of a little
made
shake to it.
made me feel a little uneasy.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
just
it's not maybe as immediately moving as like a Heroes as far as like, you know, how it makes me feel, but this song makes me feel, and I think that's good. It kind of puts me in a good mood by the end of it. Yeah. I don't
it's
know if
just
that's a hot
interesting
take,
that
but
it's interesting that Rico was like interested in my thoughts on this when was interested in what you guys were gonna think about the second half of the album.
Well, yeah, because I mean the second half. I mean, like, okay, so Schneider's it's a good segue, like Tony said. Um, but then we get like, okay, on a first listen, I can't begin to tell you how confused I was. Like, because the next track's "Sense of Doubt" is the first of three instrumental tracks, and not knowing this was coming on the album, and not even knowing that you had mentioned there's something similar on the previous album, "Low," which again Tony and I have never heard. I
Mhm.
was just like, okay, this is a weird abstract piece of music. I'm like, the low, dark sounding piano notes. I'm like, yeah, okay, this does sound like something that would be called "Sense of Doubt." Like, if doubt had a sound, this is what it would sound like. Um, and it did have kind of like a cinematic sound throughout it, like it would could be featured like in a movie.
Yep.
Um, my favorite part being like when the electric keys really take over and they have this kind of like tremolo effect.
Hmm.
Um, I did like that. I will say it was a little, I feel like, long for what it was, especially because you have two more songs following it that do similar but different things. But
that is the
Yeah.
shortest one of the three instrumentals, bro.
but it's I don't nearly enjoy it as much as the next instrumental. That's I'll keep it at that. But this was a song where it felt longer than it is for me at least.
Yeah, it's kind of like it definitely was one of those moments where like on the first listen, you know, I'm not looking at the song play on Spotify.
Yeah.
So I almost was like, "Oh, did the album finish? Like, are we already done? Did a different album start playing?" And
Hmm.
I was like, "No, we're still trekking along." I Sense of Doubt is definitely I thought that was one of my least favorites of the trilogy here, but actually I don't know, it's kind of good though. It's like every time I hear that first piano come in the da 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 da, I'm like, all
Hmm.
right, we're in the weeds of it. But no, I actually do like the other parts, especially like halfway through where you kind of hear like maybe like a vibraphone or something.
Yeah.
It's really ambient for a second. That is definitely my favorite part of it. Um, and I think we get more shades of that in Moss Garden following.
Hmm.
It
Um,
it kind of sounds like if the composer from Minecraft made like nightmare music. Um,
Well, it's definitely like um and it definitely has like Eno's influence all over it. I don't know if you've heard like some of his solo albums are very much sparse. I know like there's a music for airports is like one of his more famous solo albums where it's just a lot of it's just like repetitive, just like the same notes. But I think it was like also Brian Eno had like some kind of like recording or creative technique just to spark your creativity. I think one of them was like play the same like five or six notes the entire time and like
yeah,
create a song out of it.
I read that on Wikipedia that he has like a book of like cards
Yeah.
that has different like creative like commands or like
It's so
challenges on it.
abstract. It's like you're like, how do I
Yeah, which I like that. It kind of reminds me of when Rick Rubin gave Tom Petty the magnets for his fridge that had words on them, and he
Yep.
used that when he had writer's block during Echo. Like,
Yep.
I do think that's cool to kind of take different creative, directions other than just the stereotypical, like, okay, let's write a song, let's grab the guitar,
Mhm.
let's try to come up with lyrics.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
my friend has words on his fridge, like magnets, but we just make dirty sentences out of it. So
Wow.
shout out to Petty for his restraints.
You're being creative. That's all that matters.
Tony, did you like Moss Garden more or less than Sense of Doubt?
Um, kind of the same. Like Monster Garden is like a full solid minute longer, and it doesn't venture as far away from where it's at. You know, it kind of stays more grounded throughout. But it's pretty cool where it's at though. Where like
Mhm.
Sense of Doubt, I'm like, okay, the piano little walk down's kind of whatever. Like this one, I think Moss Garden I would like more. I think I like it more than Sense of Doubt when I'm listening to the whole album and I'm like really immersed in it. It's kind of hard to not think of these songs as like a trilogy, as the last part of the album. But I mean, honestly, both are kind of about the same for me. I mean, not to jump too far ahead, but I think that actually the third part here is definitely my least favorite of the bunch. But I
Oh,
think
thank
Moss
God we're
Garden,
on the same page.
yeah. So I mean, Rico, what can you add there for Moss Garden?
Well, interesting enough, last night Lindsay and I watched the latest episode of The Amazing Race where they were in Kyoto
Mhm.
and they were showing these like beautiful like gardens and the song like felt right at home of where they were in the world because this does sound like a piece of music you would listen to like to zen out, to
I
Yeah.
knew you
just
were gonna
like
say that.
to calm yourself, and it's very relaxing. I really like this one. This one gave me shades of Breath Away from Heaven from George Harrison's Cloud
Hmm.
Nine. It gave me that kind of similar soundscape, but this one being less of a song, more just kind of just like it's kind. I mean, it's kind of background music, and not in a bad way. Just like, I mean, you can only listen to the song actively so much because there's not like a ton going on.
Right.
Um, I do like it's like the exact opposite of the previous track, Sense of Doubt. Like it's still atmospheric, but it's like pleasant and calming. Um, I did wonder. I feel like throughout this song, and maybe too in the next song, and I just didn't catch it and write it in my notes. I do feel like you hear like similar like rocket noises that I felt like you started hearing in V2 Schneider. And I
Oh,
don't
kind
know.
of near the end where it's kind of like
Yeah,
kind of sounds like the
Yeah.
Velcro pole, that's
yeah,
how I
and I
think
didn't know
about
if
it.
that was intentional or it was just like they were working with similar keyboard noises. But I do think that was interesting, and it is my favorite of the three instrumental tracks. My least favorite, like Tony's, being the next one. Chris, do you have any idea how to pronounce this next song?
I believe it's like New Cologne or something. Something very
Okay,
German. I don't know
well,
how
well,
exactly to
we'll go
pronounce
with
it.
that. I did
Yeah.
read that it was named after a district in Berlin with a slightly different spelling. This is my least favorite on the whole album. Um, I did like the best part about the song is reading um, that Bowie played the sax himself,
Yep.
and then like he knew he was like offbeat during some of it, but then when he played it back, he's like, "Oh no, I kind of like this. Like keep it
Yeah.
in." So I liked reading about that, but like the sax itself is a little much for me. Some of the crunchy guitar noises I think are cool because they add nice texture.
Hmm.
Um, but like some of those like synths and like organ noises reminded me of like a like Halloween soundtrack, like spooky, scary, and I don't know.
Yes.
It was just not my jam. And I feel like by this point in the album, I was like, man, we had so many great songs at the beginning of the album, and I understand them, him and Eno wanting to probably take a little venture outside of those pop songs, but I'm like, I by this point in the album, I was like, I want another song. I don't know if you were feeling that same way, Tony.
Yeah, I was. Well, I think I more so accepted defeat that this was going to be the end of the album like this. But But okay, so I will say this. I couldn't really get into this track.
Mhm.
Like at least with Sense of Doubt, it was kind of cinematic with kind of where it was kind of going back and forth. With Moss Garden, it was very immersive. I know I said that a minute ago. But with New Colm, I think really the only thing that I really like actively liked about it was the sax, but mostly just that little ba 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 da da little high note he does. Because
Mhm.
to me, that is very telling of the next track, or kind of a throwback to maybe the beginning of Sons of the Silent Age. I was like, that part caught my attention. Um, and it is 4.5 minutes, and that's pretty long for a song that you're not really into. Kind of respect that, he just kind of went all out with this last half of the album. Sure, but I mean, it gets a skip for me. I'll say that.
Now, because I was kind of prepared for you, Tony, to like be in love with these three songs, and I was ready to give you shit because,
He's just
uh,
looking for a fight. You see what I deal with,
well,
Chris?
only because on our
Brother.
last episode we talked about the Wilco album, and you didn't like some of the longer outros and stuff, and I kind of agreed with you, but I was ready for you to like be loving these instrumental songs. So I am glad that you and I are on a similar page when it comes to these
Well,
songs.
V2 Schneider's a bop, though. I do like that one a lot.
Well, no, I in my rankings, I will say Moss Garden I like a little better than it, but just slightly. It's like they're like neck and neck for me. Uh,
So, Chris, do you have any insight here on this little instrumental break of the album? Any thoughts? Context? Please, anything? No, just kidding.
I mean, yeah, when I first started listening to it, I was like, oh, like you guys, like, okay, this is like, oh, we just took a major left turn or whatever after the hot first half, and then I like it, I respect it, see what he, especially after watching Moon Age Daydream, I understand like what he was doing and going for. As I mentioned earlier, just making what he wanted. Doesn't matter like what people liked it or not. Um, Definitely shows the German influence on especially Kraftwerk on this side of the album. I think Bowie probably helped bring more of that electronic type of music more to the mainstream than like people probably wouldn't have. I don't know if obviously I'm too young for that time, but I don't know if it would have gotten the attention had he not done it. But it's pretty cool.
and you did say, and I don't want you to spoil the album for us, assuming one day Tony and I will listen to it for this podcast. You said there's something like similar that happens on Low, like, or not necessarily like a trilogy of instrumentals, but there are some kind of more out there elements on that album as well.
Yeah, it's basically set up
Similar.
same format. Like first half is like, songs that we know, and then the second half is like this.
So,
These
is it
more,
one of those things like if you took the first half of both of those albums and put them together, you get like a super awesome record?
oh hell
I mean,
Well, I
it's
mean,
cool. I mean, it's. You want to go to the next last track?
yeah. Do we finish off the set list here? Track list, excuse me.
might as well.
Yeah, I am. When I first heard this album, maybe just because sitting through those first or the last three songs was kind of a journey, but slightly a struggle. I absolutely love The Secret Life of Arabia.
Mhm.
In fact, on after first listen, it was my second favorite on the album.
Mm.
And I almost even liked it more than Heroes, just because I was like, wow, this
Wow.
is so different than the last three songs. And this is just one of those songs to me where it's like it's got a great groove, and
Yeah.
it doesn't feel so much like verse chorus like some of the other tracks. It just kind of felt like a longer groove that the vocals would kind of come in and out. Again, it gave me a lot of Talking Heads vibes, David Burns vibes especially when he sings "The Secret Life." Um, the funky guitar I really enjoyed. The piano playing I thought was very fitting. Bass line was absolutely one of my favorite parts of this song. And again, it's one of those songs where like the vocals start and he's singing in that lower register that I don't love as much. But then like once the groove gets going, like I just feel like he's cooking, the rest of the band's cooking. Um, One of the songs where I felt like I was less invested in the lyrics, but it's like I kind of didn't care because the
Right.
music was just that damn good.
Hmm.
And I thought it was a really cool way to end the album. Like I love an album that sometimes just ends on like a kind of more of a fun track where it's not trying to be like an epic closer, whether it's a ballad or a 10-minute, long song. Only part I didn't like about the song was the kind of washy sounding hi-hat. A very small complaint, I understand, but
I get you on that though.
especially last night when I was giving it like one of my final listens, I was just kind of like, if I had to nitpick, it's just like the hi-hat I didn't like, but everything else I loved. I probably sense I like the song a little bit more than Tony from his reaction, but
No, I like it a lot. I kind of just, I kind of feel a little bit different about some of the stuff you're saying. I mean, I see what you're saying about the hi-hat. Once again, it's a very minute detail,
Yeah.
you know. But this was definitely one of those songs where, like, once again, we kind of return back to like the intro track, a little bit dancier. We got the high vocals and the low vocals, which I'm digging that. The actual like falsetto hook of the Secret Life is pretty on par with the hook in Beauty and the Beast. Like those are great. Those are earworms. Um, Something kind of interesting about the song to me is there's a lot of repeated lyrics, which you're like, well, that's not that unique, but they're over different sections of music and done different. So like, I mean, I'm sure for you, Chris, you got the song in your head front to back, but kind of the more I listen to it more and more, but I'm still kind of thrown around with the structure. If that kind of makes sense.
I get it.
Which isn't a bad or a good thing, but it's definitely just something that makes the song unique to me.
Oh, for sure. It's not a normal structure how you would think, because it's definitely far from a pop song.
Right, right. Where you could look at the first track and be like, okay, as far as what a song is, this is
Yeah.
pretty. It's a song. Where this is definitely a
Mhm.
song, but it's unique. I keep recycling that word, but when it first starts off, it almost sounds like it could be kind of like a Police song. I'm a big Police fan, so that is a plus for me. But as it progresses, it's definitely its own thing. Best bass work on the record for sure. Gets really active and moving.
Yeah, that
Um,
rhythm trio is just spectacular.
maybe this isn't the fair statement, but at least at this point in the album, I'm like, okay, this is a lot of actual like normal piano and not just like synths, which
Hmm.
I thought that was cool. To hear some of that, I appreciated it. And yeah, I think it's a really good closer. Even if you got rid of the previous trio of instrumentals, I still think this would be a dope closer.
For sure.
Um, and it is short. It kind of fades out, or does it fade out? It ends a little sooner than I was hoping.
Hmm.
I could definitely use a little longer on it, but that's okay. That's okay. I'll just listen to it again. No biggie.
There you go.
Yeah.
Tony, I do want to kind of go back to a point you mentioned about the piano and the synths. I kind of felt the same way. Like I was glad to hear more straightforward piano than, all the synths because it's funny. I am liking synths more and more as I get older, and the more and more I listen to different types of music. Um, but Chris, I kind of remember when you and I first were like talking about, bands and stuff we liked when we first met. And I
Mhm.
mentioned, oh, one of my favorite bands is the Killers. You're like, I've never been able to like really fully get into them. And I think I sent you a song or two, and you're like, yeah, the synths just kind of throw me off for a loop. You're like, I just can't get into it because of the synths. So it's
Mhm.
funny for listening to this album all the way through. I'm like, oh, you want to talk about some synths? Like, there are some crazy synths on this album. But again, it's kind of like I can understand it's like a newer band like the Killers. I mean, like, their first album was, in the early 2000s. It's kind of like they're taking their influences from much earlier bands and artists who have done
Yeah.
that kind of sound before. So at the same time, I kind of understand where it's like, you know, some people will hate someone like Green Day because their favorite band is like The Clash, or the Dead Kennedys or something. So,
I think with me, it's just like everyone uses like that same synth sound. So it's like,
yeah, and this, I will say, it's the benefit of this album, there's a lot of different sounding synths, like
yeah.
they definitely are pulling from different bags when it comes to the soundscapes. Even like the guitar work, like there's some guitar tones that are like really crunchy and fuzzy, and then some that are more clean. And I will say I really appreciate on the album just the variety of sound. I think it maybe even has more variety than maybe Ziggy Stardust, I would say.
Oh, easily.
Um, and I liked the album for that. Um, I'd be lying if like I want to like this one more than Ziggy because there are songs that I almost feel like I go back to more, like Heroes, like Beauty and the Beast,
Hmm.
this closing track, Joe the Lion, Blackout. Um, but I will say it is hard for me to sometimes like get past the fact that there's like a third of the album that is soundscapes. Some that
Right.
I like more than others. So I don't know, Tony, if that affected your overall liking of this album, that like there is a section that's kind of like you either really tune into it and fully immerse yourself in it, or you kind of tune out of it because it's like cool but not like a song, you know.
I understand your question, but I don't really know how to answer that. I will say this, just maybe just more straight comparing it to how much I enjoy Ziggy. It is tough because they are very different records. Like with Ziggy, I'm expecting a consistent record that definitely sounds like a 70s record, like
Hmm.
you listen to the whole thing and you're definitely at that era of time. Where I listen to Heroes and I'm just like in its own world, its own little universe. And like it is hard, because I feel like with Heroes, yeah, throw on Beauty and the Beast, throw on Heroes, throw on Secret Life. I'm like, strap me in. These are hard hitting songs. They're crunchy. They're dancey, catchy. Where with Ziggy, I don't know if I would necessarily say that,
Hmm.
but there's a lot of good moments on Ziggy I really like. Like kind of one of my favorites that maybe Rico doesn't agree with so much on Ziggy was Star. Like it's just a really fun song that's catchy, and you definitely don't get a Star moment on this record, but I don't think you get any of these moments on Ziggy either.
Right.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think objectively you got to say, I prefer Ziggy just because I like the whole album. Where this one, the end's a little bit of a slog, and the only song I don't like would be Newcomb. Um, yeah, I mean, apples and oranges, man.
I respect it.
So were you surprised by any of our takes, Chris? I mean, like, were you expecting us to like this album less than we did or more than we did?
Or you thought that no one would understand Sons of the Silent Age, but I have exquisite taste?
What are you doing? Being like a teacher's pet right now, Tony?
It's about as what I expected, especially the second half of the album with the instrumental stuff. I expected reactions like that, but I do love how you guys like. Obviously, you prefer like Ziggy, but at the same time, you also love what's on here as well, outside of the more ambient stuff.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say too is that like when Tony was talking about how like Ziggy sounds like a really 70s album. I will say this album, I feel like probably for the time of its release, it sounded a little bit ahead of its time. Like there's
Oh,
moments on this album that sounds more like 80s to me.
Yeah, for sure.
But
oh,
not
yeah.
and I mentioned it before on this podcast, 80s is like my least favorite decade of music, but like this sounded like the best parts of 80s like production or songwriting. So
Oh
I
yeah,
do think this album was very ahead of its time.
oh yeah, you could definitely hear the influences, especially his Berlin Trilogy had on like Talking Heads, especially David Byrne.
Yes.
Um, a lot of the new wave alternative stuff that came out after this. You could probably just all pinpoint like, oh yeah, like you could hear like Low or Heroes on it, even like bands like later on like Radiohead or something
Oh,
would definitely
interesting.
been influence, and obviously you too, of course.
So Chris, are we getting low next? Because I'm definitely getting excited for a
I
third
know
Bowie
it's
record.
Yeah, I was gonna say this begs the question: where do we go from here? I mean, we're not. You don't have to make a decision today. Obviously, we got a lot of time to figure that out. But you
I know
know,
it's like I'm inclined to give you Low now because of this, but at the same time, like station to station,
I mean, there's
I have to
there's
think about it.
it's hard. He's got a lot of albums. Like and that like I can name you a ton of his albums just by name.
Hmm.
And then there's probably a ton that like obviously I've never heard of before. So, he's kind of like it was kind of like the same thing with like Bruce and Tony. Like, okay, what Springsteen album do I give Tony next? Um,
I may have to like write them on like a piece of paper, crumple it up, put in like a hat or something, and just
Stick them on a
film the
dartboard.
reveal
Yeah.
and just film the reveal for you guys.
I wasn't listening to any snippets here, but I was just clicking to see if I knew any of the songs on Station to Station or Low.
Mhm.
Seeing the length of the first song on Station to Station, I really want you to give us that one just so I can see Rico's pain and suffering.
Yes.
Oh no.
I would appreciate that, but I'm down for either one.
All right.
Well, I mean, hey, if you want to figure out what album we're doing next, you need to stick around. And Chris, we're probably going to have you on a couple episodes in the future, maybe before the Bowie one.
Mhm.
We were talking before we started recording this episode while we were waiting on Tony, who was fashionably late.
Oh,
Um,
always.
we were talking about what Bruce album we are going to give you next, Tony. I know you and Chris in the group chat have talked about the next Beach Boys album for me. Chris and I are also talking about what U2 to give you next because Chris hasn't been on one of our U2 episodes,
A
and
little hurt by that, but it's okay.
yeah, that was a crime. And he should have been a part of the last Bruce one too. We only did that one in rapid speed because of Tony wanted to hear, at that time for what he was doing.
And
for
Rico
school.
gatekeeps. He's like, if it's not on the podcast, you can't listen to it. Even with bands I already know albums from. Okay, I'm not gonna get into that.
It's all for the content, Tony.
Get out of here.
But yeah, Chris, you're going to be in some future episodes. We're glad to have you back on. It's been too long.
Yeah,
For sure.
it's always fun having you on.
Definitely, I love it.
And
I
yeah,
love reactions like today.
yeah. So we'll be back with you, Chris, soon enough. Drop us comments. Let us know what you think of this album. Drop us a comment and let Chris know what you think he should give us next for Bowie. I'm sure there's hardcore Bowie fans out there who are like, it has to be this album next or that album next. So it'll be interesting to see what other people say. But yeah,
Yes, please help.
until next time, we hope you take care and you'll be hearing from us soon. Bye
All
bye.
right. Thank you very much.